Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, a group of Islamic extremists has claimed responsibility for the bus bombing of Israeli tourists in Bulgaria last week. An email written by a member of the group said, "One of our units managed to bomb a bus full of Jewish tourists, plunderers of the Holy Land." The message went on to say that the month of Ramadan is a month of holy war and martyrdom. It is a month for fighting the enemies of Allah, the Jews and the Americans, until they leave the land of Islam. Israel insists that they have solid evidence that Iran is responsible for that attack.
Israel has given the Palestinian Authority $45 million to help ease its financial crisis. The State of Israel has approved the advance of 180 million shekels to the PA as a goodwill gesture for the Muslim holiday of Ramadan. According to the Palestinian chief negotiator, the PA is in the midst of the worst financial crisis since its establishment, with a debt of over $1.5 billion. The authority is unable to pay the salaries of the public sector employees this month, and the entire Palestinian economy is on the verge of collapse. According to one senior official, the Israeli government hopes that this move will improve the atmosphere between Israel and the Palestinian Authority.
The BBC's official Olympic website has not only denied that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, it has named East Jerusalem as the capital of Palestine. This blatant anti-Israel bias has caused an uproar among Israelis and people around the world who recognize Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel. After numerous complaints, the site was changed to list Jerusalem as Israel's seat of government, with the stipulation that most foreign embassies reside in Tel Aviv. The Israeli government has flooded the BBC's complaints department with letters and has begun a Facebook and international media campaign to convey the message that Jerusalem is Israel's capital city and that the BBC and the world should recognize it as such.
The International Olympic Committee has officially rejected the request to observe 1 minute of silence in memory of the 11 Israeli athletes who were murdered by Palestinian terrorists at the Munich Games in 1972. President of the IOC, Jacques Roga, said that his committee feels that the opening ceremony is an atmosphere that is not fit to remember such a tragic incident. In a surprise move, however, the IOC held a small impromptu vigil for the Munich 11 without notifying the victims' families or the Israeli delegation. Roga referred to the ceremony as a spontaneous suggestion, but families of the victims are calling it a publicity stunt. Widows of the victims were furious, saying that the undeclared ceremony was a ruse to deflect criticism from the IOC for denying the minute of silence at the 2012 opening ceremony.
A report in the UK's Sunday Times claims that Israeli authorities are becoming increasingly concerned for the security of the Israeli Olympians at the London Games. The opening ceremony, which was held on Friday, marked 40 years since the Munich massacre, and Israeli security officials are reportedly concerned that Hezbollah will attempt to mark the anniversary with another terrorist attack.
According to media outlets in the United Kingdom, a Muslim teenager attacked an Olympic torchbearer as she ran through the town of Gravesend, just outside of London. Witnesses say that the young man shouted Allahu Akbar as he attacked Anna Skora and tried to knock the torch out of her hands. Skora was unharmed during the incident, and the young man was arrested. He is being charged with assaulting a police officer, and creating a public disturbance.
Syrian rebels have captured the town of Rayahina, just 1 mile from the IDF fortifications in the Golan Heights. Israeli Defense Minister Ehud Barak said that there is an increasing threat on the Syrian border. Israel raised the military alert and canceled soldiers' leaves in response to the heightened threat. Barak said that Syrian troops were fighting 200 meters away from UN forces and 800 meters away from the Israeli border. Israel's foreign ministry filed a complaint with the United Nations, stating that Syrian troops had entered a demilitarized zone during the fighting.
The Free Syrian Army, fighting against the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, released a disturbing statement that Syria's chemical weapons have been moved to airports on the republic's borders. According to the statement, the Assad regime began moving its stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction several months ago, with the goal of increasing pressure on the region and the international community.
In an interview given to Fox News, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu predicted that Bashar al-Assad's government would eventually fall. He said that his main concern is that the regime will collapse in chaos, allowing Syria's chemical weapons to be transferred to terrorists. He said, "We certainly don't want the chemical weapons falling into the hands of Hezbollah or some other terror group. It is a great threat." Netanyahu also spoke with Fox News about the danger of a nuclear-armed Iran and the P5+1 negotiations, which were held in Turkey. He said that the talks have not stopped the regime one bit, not 1 inch. In fact, since last year's round of talks, Iran has enriched enough material for 5 nuclear bombs. He said that the Iranians are thumbing their nose at the international community and the P5+1. They are basically saying, we can talk, we can delay, and we can deceive while we continue to race toward atomic weapons. That is effectively what is happening.
A neo-Nazi group in Hungary has offered a reward to anyone willing to provide the names of Jews who demanded that local authorities arrest Nazi war criminal Ladislav Csikszentmihalyi. The group's website said that they intend to distribute 100,000 forints to those who send them the most useful information about the participants, adding the words, "Good hunting."
A group of 100 Druze students who visited Damascus as part of their studies have petitioned the International Red Cross for immediate evacuation to Israel. The students, who live on the Golan Heights, informed the Red Cross that the situation in Syria has deteriorated so badly that they fear for their safety and want to return to Israel immediately.
Terrorists in Egypt opened fire on a bus of Israeli soldiers traveling on a road close to the border. No injuries were reported, although the bus sustained damage. This attack comes just 1 week after Israeli intelligence Major General Avi Kochavi briefed the Knesset on the increasing terror threat from Egypt. Kochavi said that since the Muslim Brotherhood came to power, the IDF has thwarted at least 10 attacks against Israel from terrorists on the Egyptian side of the border.
The Israeli Defense Forces publicized Hamas's indoctrination of young children during their summer camp program. Young boys who are sent to these camps are exposed to propaganda about Israel and are taught to liberate Palestine by force. The course includes weapons training in which the children fire pellet guns at targets made to look like Jews. They are told to run and jump through flaming hoops and are made to walk on rusted nails and knife blades with bare feet. They are indoctrinated with radical Islamic teachings and from a young age are taught the violent and hateful ideology of Hamas.
Israeli Premier Benjamin Netanyahu sent his condolences to U.S. President Barack Obama for the victims of the Aurora, Colorado movie theater shooting. In his letter, Netanyahu wrote that all Israelis stand with the American people as they grieve this horrific tragedy that claimed the lives of so many. We well understand the pain and the loss that you are experiencing.
Jews around the world are fasting and mourning today on what is known as the worst day on the Jewish calendar. On the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av, the first Jewish temple was destroyed by the Babylonians, which ultimately led to the Babylonian exile. The second temple was also destroyed on the 9th of Av, 655 years later, by the Roman Empire. The city of Jerusalem was then sacked, burned to the ground, and renamed. The 9th of Av also marks the day in 1492 that the Jews were expelled from Spain. We at Israel Now News pray for God's blessings upon you and upon all of Israel during this day of mourning.
And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here in the beautiful Crown Plaza Hotel, Jerusalem. My guest today is Ray Ramirez, Creative Director of the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. Ray, thank you for being on the show.
Josh, thanks for having me.
Ray, you're in charge of the Feast of Tabernacles, one of the biggest, actually the biggest tourist event in Israel. We're here at the Crown Plaza Hotel where most of the pilgrims stay and take part of that festival. Tell me a little bit about what is the Feast of Tabernacles?
Well, the Feast of Tabernacles began in the early 80s as a group of Christians from different countries decided they wanted to come up in Jerusalem and to celebrate the biblical Feast of Tabernacles. And since that time, it has continued annually, year after year, and just continued to grow. And today, the Feast of Tabernacles sees more than 5,000 Christians from more than 80 countries come to Jerusalem for the feast during the biblical calendar time of Sukkot, as the Jewish festival is called.
You know, a lot of Jews and Christians really see the Feast of Tabernacles as the fulfillment of prophecy of the nations of the world coming up to Jerusalem. How do you feel being an international Christian embassy? Do you feel that weight of that mantle on your shoulders?
Well, we don't necessarily view this as a direct fulfillment of prophecy. If you look at the scripture in Zechariah that talks about the Feast of Tabernacles and the nations coming up, it gives a pretty specific time frame of when that will happen. But we do see this as a precursor leading up to that time as the nations desire to come up to worship the Lord here in Jerusalem. And also it's an expression of Christian love and support to the nation of Israel to see Christians coming up and praying and standing with Israel, even during difficult years, as again, the feast now has a 32-year history. Even during the years of the Intifada and difficult years, Christians still came in droves to stand with Israel, to support with Israel, and to worship here in Jerusalem.
I remember those times that when the suicide bombings were going off in Israel, it's not like it is today where it's completely safe in Jerusalem. You know, we still had thousands of Christians who would still come for the feast, even when no one else would come. There were barely any tourists here. Why do you think it was so important for Christians to come for the Feast of Tabernacles?
Well, again, I think it's an opportunity for Christians to come and actively show their love and support for the nation of Israel. So there is a drive, and then there is an opportunity for Christians to come. Many of them come for the first time to experience the land of Israel and to see the land of Israel, the history, the biblical history that's here, and to get a feel for what's happening in this nation today. So I think there's just something within the Christian people that draws them here during this time of year.
One of the most amazing things to me is that you've been able to draw people from so many different countries. How many countries are represented at the feast, and where are the largest constituencies coming from?
Typically, we have more than 80 nations represented during the feast currently. Our biggest contingencies come from some of our stronger branch connections throughout the world, traditionally Norway, Finland, Germany. And actually, we've seen a tremendous growth in South America, specifically from Brazil in the last 5-6 years. And now, in the last 2 years, we're seeing development and growth from Asia.
So the Feast of Tabernacles this year is in October. Tell me about some of the highlights of the event. You know, what can people expect? I know that there's incredible music, there's pageantry, there's speakers. What are some of the big highlights this year?
And that's a good question, and I think part of it is a testament to our leadership throughout the years of the ICEJ to develop relationships and to foster relationships with Jewish leaders and politicians and leaders here in Israel. And also, again, I think it's a mutual thing that's been developing over the last 4 or 5 years, Christian-Jewish dialogue and working together and being able to just come together and dialogue together. It's just something that's just been coming together.
Ray, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our audience?
I would just say we'd love to see you here September 30th through October 4th in Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles. We believe it's an event that is unlike any other in the world. It's coming to a very unique place, the land of the Bible, coming to worship with Christians from all over the world. And we believe it's an experience that can change your life.
Thank you, Ray, for being on the show.
Thank you.
And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
next, Shining Light from Israel.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come visit Capernaum, where Jesus restored a paralytic's helpless legs. Sail the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus walked on the water. Stroll through the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus healed a servant's ear. To learn more about standing where it all happened, in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
Is Israel an apartheid state? More and more these days, one hears this charge made. Oddly, when South Africa was an apartheid state, no one accused Israel of being one. The reason the charge was never made then, and shouldn't be made now, is the same. There's no truth to it. To those who know something about Israel or have just visited there once, the accusation is absurd, if not obscene. Indeed, it's a libel. But many people don't know very much about Israel, so let's respond to this accusation. First, what exactly is an apartheid state? And does Israel, or any one other country, fit that definition? Let's look at South Africa, the country that came up with this term. In South Africa from 1948 to 1994, there was an official policy that declared blacks second-class citizens in every aspect of life. Blacks couldn't vote, couldn't hold political office, were forced to reside in certain locations, couldn't marry whites, couldn't even use the same public restrooms as whites. Not one of those restrictions applies to the many Arabs living in Israel. 1.5 million Arabs live in Israel. They constitute about 20% of that country's population. Every single one of them has the same exact rights as all other Israeli citizens, and they always have. They can vote, and they do. They can serve in the Israeli parliament, and they do. They can own property, businesses, and work in professions alongside other Israelis, and they do. They can be judges, and they are. Here's one powerful example. It was an Arab judge, who sentenced the former president of Israel to jail on a rape charge. And nobody batted an eyelash that an Arab judge would sentence a Jewish president to prison. Some other examples. Rita Mansour is the youngest ambassador in Israel's history. Walid Badir is an international soccer star on Israel's national team. Ismail Khaldi was the deputy consul of Israel in San Francisco. Khaled Abu Tomei is a major journalist with the Jerusalem Post. Galeb Majadel was until recently a minister in the Israeli government. They are all Israeli Arabs, not one is a Jew. And how many people outside of Israel know that all the road signs in Israel, for example, are in English, Hebrew, and Arabic? Not only is Israel not an apartheid state, Arabs in Israel are freer than any Arabs in the Arab world. No Arab in any Arab country has the civil rights and personal liberty that Arabs in Israel have. That's because Israel is a pluralistic, liberal democracy, the only one in that part of the world. Now you might say, well, okay, Palestinians who live inside Israel have all these rights, but what about the Palestinians who live in what are commonly known as the occupied territories? Aren't they treated differently? Well, of course they are. Because they're not citizens of Israel. They're governed by either the Palestinian Authority or Hamas. The only control Israel has over these people's lives takes place when they want to enter Israel. Then they are subjected to long lines and strict searches because Israel has to weed out potential terrorists. And what about the security wall that divides Israel and the West Bank? Is that an example of apartheid? That's rather easy to respond to. Is the security fence being built between the United States and Mexico an example of apartheid? Of course not. Israel built its security wall solely in order to keep terrorists from entering Israel and murdering its citizens. And you know what? It's worked. The wall, most of which, by the way, is an electronic fence, went up in 2002 during a time when Palestinian suicide bombers were regularly murdering Israeli civilians in buses, on streets, and in restaurants. And the moment the barrier went up, terrorism went down almost to zero. So then, why is Israel called an apartheid state? Because by comparing the freest, most equitable country in the Middle East to the former South Africa, those who hate Israel hope they can persuade uninformed people that Israel doesn't deserve to exist, just as apartheid South Africa didn't deserve to exist. And if you don't believe me, just ask the people who know better than anyone else what a lie it is that Israel is an apartheid state, the one out of every 5 Israelis who is an Arab, which is why they prefer to live in the Jewish state than in any Arab state. I'm Dennis Prager.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come explore Jerusalem, where Jesus opened blind eyes. Visit the hills of Galilee, where Jesus fed the multitude. Stroll through Capernaum, where Jesus lived and taught and healed. To learn more about standing where it all happened in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
You'll never be the same.
The Yachad Center, located in Kibbutz Machanaim, about 20 kilometers north of the Sea of Galilee, provides an independent living facility and a therapeutic rehabilitation center for adult Israelis with various physical and mental disabilities. The center was established in 1983 by Gidon Peles in order to provide better care and a brighter future for his son Matan, who had suffered severe brain damage, and for others like him.
למרות שאולי יש מכנה משותף לכל המוגבלויות, והמכנה המשותף הזה הוא לחיות חיים עצמאיים ככל האפשר בתוך הקהילה. כל אחד עם המוגבלות שלו, איך הוא מתגבר עליה, ואיך הוא יכול או מסוגל לחיות חיים עצמאיים של מקסימום בחירה, מכל סוג של נכות או מוגבלות שקיימת. מה שעומד בפני הורה כשהוא נתקל בילד עם צרכים מיוחדים, תינוק או במהלך חייו, שהוא עם צרכים מיוחדים, זה או לקבל את זה ולהיכנע ולהגיד זה הגורל וזה מה שיש, או להגיד אני הולך לעשות עכשיו משהו שיאפשר לבן שלי את החיים הטובים ביותר האפשריים מבחינתו. בסך הכל מה אנחנו רוצים כהורים לילדים שלנו? אנחנו רוצים שהם יהיו מאושרים, נכון? זה מה שאנחנו רוצים.
In contrast to other programs for the disabled in Israel, the Yachad Center aims to integrate its residents as much as possible into the community. By providing simple jobs on the kibbutz for the residents, the center enables these special individuals to participate actively in the Israeli workforce.
אם המוצר הזה, השוק מוכן לשלם, זה הכבוד של היצרן. כמו של כל אחד מאיתנו. ואנחנו אומרים, גם אם הם מוגבלויות, התחושות שלהם הם כמו שלנו. אם מישהו מכבד את מה שהם עושים ומוכן לשלם בשביל זה, זה נותן להם כבוד. פינת החי זה פנינה שמאפשרת לאנשים שהם בעלי מוגבלות קשה ובדרך כלל רגילים לקבל, פתאום להפוך לגוף, למי שנותנים לאחרים, שיש באחריותם חי אחר, יצור חי אחר שהם אחראים עליו. הם מאכילים אותו לאורך כל השנה, הם אחראים עליו. והיכולת להפוך את היוצרות האלה ושהבן אדם, שהמטופל פתאום הופך למטפל ואחראי, זה דבר שהוא הישג בלתי רגיל וכולם מרגישים בו.
Providing for the operation of a therapeutic animal farm has made a tremendous impact in the lives of the disabled in Kibbutz Machanaim. Your giving through ICEJ enables us to show Christian care and compassion and to say to the people of Israel, you are not alone.
The Word of God teaches us an important lesson in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 17. It says, "He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and He will pay back what He has given." The Word of God tells us as we reach out to the poor and to the needy in our societies, it is as if we were lending to the Lord, and He promises us that He will bless us in return. And I want to invite you today to become part of the social outreach of the International Christian Embassy. Consider placing a financial seed into our ministry and help us to bless the Jewish people more fully. We are your embassy here in Jerusalem, your outstretched arm to the nation of Israel. May the Lord bless you here from Zion.
That's all for this week's edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan Elrom.
And I'm Erin Viner. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.